Hi, hey, hello, what is up, my lovely liddies? I hope you're having a great day. Today we've got a pretty dang exciting video coming up. This will be a continuation of our deep dive into Gothic literature series. If you've missed the first few episodes, don't worry, I have them linked down in the description box below. Some of the stuff we've already covered includes female roles in Gothic texts, death and gore, and religion. So moving right along, let's get into the video. Weather. Let's talk about it. For those of you that don't know, weather is the state of the atmosphere at a place and time as regards heat, dryness, sunshine, wind, rain, etc. I'm just being cheeky here. But honestly, before science was such a mainstream philosophy, weather could be summed up as basically strange magical acts of God. So it really makes sense that in a historically extremely religious society, weather and what it symbolizes would be a huge trope of their literature. To give you a little sneak peek into what we're actually going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking at how Jane Eyre and Dracula both use weather to set the mood and foreshadow events. But before we dive deep into it, here's a little message from today's sponsor. Hello, and welcome to the sponsored section of the video. Today I am super excited to announce that our sponsor is Audible. If you don't know what Audible is the leading provider of audiobooks in the entire world. They have over 180,000 different texts to choose from, including Jane Eyre and Dracula. And when you sign up for an account, you get one audiobook for free. This is the best place for audiobooks, and I really can't recommend it enough. Their website is www.audible.com. And after you're finished with your free book and you want another, you can use the code ZOELIT for 20% off your first purchase. Now back to the video. Once again, huge shout out to Audible for sponsoring this video and making this series happen. But let's get back to business. Weather was a huge trope of Gothic fiction. We all know that classic phrase, "It was a dark and stormy night." Well, that's Gothic lit. Diving straight into Jane Eyre, a classic within the Gothic genre, we can see Charlotte Bronte really make great use of weather as a mood setter and a character definer. A great example involves the character Miss Temple. For those of you that haven't read the book yet, be sure to check it out on Audible. Miss Temple is basically a godsend while Jane is sent off to boarding school. Let's take a look. Some heavy clouds, swept from the sky by a rising wind, had left the moon bare, and her light streaming in through a window near shone full both on us and on the approaching figure, which we at once recognize as Miss Temple. Now, this scene was right after Jane was pretty publicly humiliated by the schoolmaster, Mr. Brocklehurst, so Miss Temple came to offer her some emotional support. So Bronte used this wind and this sunshine, she used the weather to quite literally show that emotional storm being blown away from Jane so she can, find that light again. Now, moving on, we can compare that with a seemingly pleasant scene contrasted with foul weather. Here's what happens right after Mr. Rochester proposed to Jane later on in the novel, something that the two had been both kind of pining for the entire time they were together. But what had befallen the night? The moon was not yet set, and we were all in shadow. I could scarcely see my master's face, near as I was. And what ailed the chestnut tree? It writhed and groaned, while wind roared in the laurel walk and came sweeping over us. A livid, vivid spark leapt out of a cloud at which I was looking, and there was a crack, a crash, and a close rattling peal, and I thought only of hiding my dazzled eyes against Mr. Rochester's shoulder. Now, this scene is a great example of Bronte's use of weather throughout the novel. She loves providing these conflicting moods, the happiness of the promised marriage with, the dark, grim foreshadowing of the weather and vice versa. And spoiler alert here, but for those of y'all that have read the book, you know that the wedding doesn't exactly pan out. Turns out Mr. Rochester was kind of hiding his, deranged, lunatic old wife in the attic, and, when she finds out about Jane, she burns the whole house down, but, funny how that all works out. But, these scenes really reinforce the idea of weather connected to, purity, truth, and at the end of the day, they're God. The weather consistently spells out the truth of the situation, like a large looming polygraph test of sorts. It's basically used as God's ways of letting them know the truth of the situation, of whether they're doing the right thing or not. But of course, it is a novel, so the characters don't necessarily always really, listen to that very well. Now, let's take this over to Bram Stoker's Dracula. We see weather used in a pretty similar way in this novel. Stoker loves to use weather and eerie scenes to kind of set the mood and really bring drama to his characters. The biggest example of this is obviously Dracula. He's the baddie of the story, and we pretty much never see any sign of good weather whenever his character is near. A great example of this is when a ship crashed to the shore of Whitby, where Mina and Lucy were staying. And to give some background, this is shortly after Jonathan, escapes Dracula's castle, but at this point in the novel, we're not really sure as to where exactly he is or where exactly Dracula is. Masses of sea fog came drifting inland. White, wet clouds which swept by in a ghostly fashion, so dank and damp and cold that it needed but little effort of imagination to think that the spirits of those lost at sea were touching their living brethren with the clammy hands of death, and many a one shuddered as the wreaths of sea mist swept by. Now, the weather on Whitby, pretty much up until this point, had been described as, pretty good. Mina writes about it being a lovely place and beautifully green and just so pretty. So what's up with the, pretty sudden, drastic change? Well, as we find out shortly thereafter in the novel, Dracula was actually aboard that boat. No kidding. And he brought the mighty tempest with him, foreshadowing this horrible eel that he was bringing with him to shore. And we have another great example of weather being used if we fast forward to the very end of the novel. I am only too happy to have been of any service. Oh God, he cried suddenly, struggling up to a sitting posture and pointing to me. It was worth for this to die. Look, look! The sun was now right down upon the mountain top, and the red gleams fell upon my face so that it was bathed in rosy light. With one impulse, the men sank on their knees, and a deep and earnest amen broke from all as their eyes followed the pointing of his finger. So, we all know the classic trope from vampire novels that vampires can't come out during the day and can only thrive at night. And that's pretty true in Dracula, but it was a little bit different. Dracula was basically just less powerful during the day and super powerful at night. But still, sunset within the novel marked a pretty significant turning point. It marked, basically when things got real, when things got really scary. If you're out past sunset or if Dracula's coming up to into that sunset, that's a pretty bad time. It meant that he was gaining power and you just weren't safe anymore. In this passage from the novel, if it isn't clear, it's pretty much immediately after Dracula is slain. And, we see this true ease that comes about and, the real victory with that sunset, being glorified. It's no longer scary, it's seen as beautiful, and it washes over the group, and it's described as bathing them, like it's bathing away their sins and their tragedies over the last, several months or so in the novel. It's like a little blessing from their creator to let them know, yes, you did it. You can enjoy life now. Woohoo! Now, Jane Eyre and Dracula obviously aren't the only examples we can pull from for this. Weather is a massively common trope within Gothic fiction. You'll find examples everywhere, but I hope these two novels gave you a good idea of how and why it's used and what makes it effective. I personally love this trope. I love the idea that if you just pay attention to the weather, you'll kind of get lots of spoilers for what's to come. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this one, please make sure to stick around for the next video. We'll be discussing class relations within the Gothic genre. And of course, here's my works cited. See you next time.